Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show, all about movies.
You're listening to The Jan Price Show, and today my guest is director Robert Adetuyi, and we're talking about his brand new movie entitled Stand. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Hi, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you on the show. I absolutely loved this movie. I loved this movie. It's so beautifully done, and the cinematography and everything, but it's so unique. It's a unique film, and I love that. So our guests know what we're talking about. You want to give a synopsis of what Stand is all about?
Well, Stand it's set in 1919, and it's it's a story that's twofold. We're following this immigrant Romeo and Juliet love story, where these two people who are on really opposite sides of these communities in 1919. When we have in Winnipeg, literally the civil unrest that's going on, and there's this whole movement towards a general strike for fair wages and worker safety. And while all that's going on, we have these two people. One is a girl who is Jewish and has recently immigrated, and then this young boy is Ukrainian who's recently immigrated to Winnipeg from the Ukraine. And here they are thrust together suddenly with this tumultuous time, and it's kind of like picking sides. Are you for or against? And of course, their families are on opposite sides of the tracks, and quite a bit goes on.
Quite a bit does go on.
Yes.
Well, it's the cinematography and the set design. I know. Did you film this on an actual set, or did you film it somewhere? And where did you film it? Did you film it in Canada?
Well, we're really fortunate that we shot the film in Winnipeg, so it's all shot in Winnipeg, where this general strike happened, where the entire city went on strike. And when I was brought the project, my first concern, because I knew we had a tight budget, was, how to recreate 1919. And as it turns out, Winnipeg is a city that has really preserved a whole historic district. So all those exterior scenes that you see with the crowds and the marching, all that, that's all there. On the interiors, we got lucky. Some places, like there's a whole sequence in a print shop, and we actually found a print shop that was active in 1919. It would have been the place where these flyers that they hand out were actually printed. So we got the luxury of filming in that actual place. And in some cases, we were inside old buildings, but we had to recreate, the set within that structure. So, but for the most part, it's called this filming on location and redressing it to look like the time period.
Well, that you were lucky to be able to find that, and it's beautifully done. And I mean, all those the lighting of this film was what let's talk about the lighting, because the lighting is just amazing.
Well, I was very fortunate. Roy, our cinematographer, I'd worked with him on a previous film, and it was a wonderful collaboration. And so when this project came along, and I knew that it was going to take a lot to recreate that time and that feel, and I knew Roy loves musicals. So I thought, okay, this is great. I've got a cinematographer who loves this medium, but also is really good at creating a moody sense of lighting. So when we started spending our time together, and of course it also brings in the production designer as well, because the three of us consult, discuss the color, tones, and all of that. And what we realized is that for Roy, he's someone who really, his lighting style is to say it comes out of the characters and the scene. He doesn't try to impose. So quite often he's using like a single light very creatively and creating those moods, because you can see a lot of our scenes, we're in a warehouse or a building, and it becomes very moody, and it's very hard to capture. And, with the full color range that you see, and yet, doing it with a single light. So we spent a lot of time discussing that feel that you see in there. And as I also and Roy our conversation is more about what's the intention in the scene, what's going on with the character in the mood, and then we work from that to let the lighting and then even the camera moves reflect that.
Well, it's just beautiful. It is. It's wonderful. It's a visual delight to watch this movie. And what it is I found amazing about it, well, the costumes, but it does have this really big production feel to it. And that's what's so, it's just beautifully done. Now, I love musical theater. I grew up doing musical theater. I studied in New York, and that's been my passion. And so this movie, obviously, it's so well done. The music is so well done and put together. Tell me about how this was based on another musical, correct?
Right, that's right. Danny Shore, who wrote the music, and then he and his partner Rick wrote I guess they worked on the musical as well together, and then they wrote the screenplay. So originally it was a stage musical that had done really well in Canada. And in fact, during one of the early stagings of the production, it was thought this thing really could have legs and could go to Broadway. And I think it was Jeff Goldblum was in the audience, and he was sitting next to Danny. And at the end of the play, it said to Danny, "This is a big show. This has got to go to Broadway." So Danny investigated that, and they realized that the cost of going to Broadway is more expensive than shooting a movie. So some people said, "You know what, Danny, why don't you work on getting the movie done? That'll really take it to another level. And then, think about Broadway." And that's what happened. So we took this wonderful play. It had 18 songs. So we had to really, cut back on the number of songs and convert it into a film style. And as I say, then the wonderful thing now is that they've taken the play and restructured it to look more like the movie, which is interesting now that, so the new play, it's a really new revamped version, is now getting ready to come out. Ahead, of course, COVID came along, so that changed a lot of our plans. But once things pull back and are safe again, that's the plan, is to now take it back as a Broadway show.
Wow. Are you involved in that, in the production of the Broadway show, Robert?
At this stage, I'm not directly involved with the Broadway production there, because as I say, they're using what we did with the film to restructure the play. So I'll be in some consulting capacity involved, but the stage is a different medium again. And so it's too early, until we get to, like I said, COVID has really slowed everything down, including, as you know,
Right.
the film release, everything's been slowed down.
Yes.
So that's why it's hard for me to say, where we're going to end up, with the Broadway thing. I mean, it's doing so well for film audiences who are watching it now. As it's playing virtually across the country, and it's expanding, which is weird when you say expanding, because theaters aren't open really, but more and more virtual theaters are adding us to their list. And so it's really interesting. Rolling out a movie during this time, it's a very different experience.
Yes, very different. Yeah, very different. And I don't know, even when things begin to open up, and it looks like perhaps in the fall is a reasonable guess that we'll get some semblance of normalcy back into our lives. But how that will all look for everybody, I don't think anybody has a crystal ball anymore.
No. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation about just what our film industry is going to look like in another year, because everyone's got wild predictions. And as a content creator, I'm always excited, because I say it doesn't matter. We'll show our movie wherever you want us to, but we'll still be creating stories.
Yeah, I mean, the creative process that doesn't stop just because the rest of the world has, in a way, it allows you to go inward and to continue that creative process if you're writing something and during this time period. I think what's really been interesting is to see the ingenuity that people have come up with during this time period. A lot of, again, the virtual theaters and all of this. Sundance starts today, and it's going to be all virtual, and the virtual film festivals, and it's sort of interesting, just to see how that unfolds and to see what we decide to incorporate as later on, whether we're certain things that seem like they're better this way, in some ways. But I'm a big believer that movies need to be seen in the movie theaters. I say this constantly, and this is a movie that definitely needs to be seen on a big screen. But many people have big screens at home now, so it's a great one to do that. So people can see it everywhere right now. I want to talk about the casting, because the two leads, the young Romeo and Juliet of this film, are just beautiful to look at, but also incredibly talented. And the gentleman who plays the father. So let's talk a bit about the casting and these young people and the father.
Well, yes. Well, I mean, of course, we knew that we had to have a wonderful Rebecca. I mean, she's this young woman who really brings the story together with her strong passion for the cause, and yet her, independence, which is so interesting to have a love story with a very strong, independent woman, and what takes her, Stefan, the young boy, to become involved in this relationship. So I always knew Laura Wiggins from the show Shameless, and I was a big fan of it. And so I knew early on that she was someone I would love to work with. And the thing is, I didn't know she could sing. So when I spoke with her manager and found out she could sing, I was like, okay, well, that's a game changer. So that happened very quickly. And our search for Stefan, who plays the young boy, love interest, he is from Winnipeg. It was really interesting because he's from that series Glee, and I was a fan of Glee, and I did not know he was from Winnipeg. So it was so fortuitous. He had decided to leave LA and come back to Winnipeg because he just wanted to get back with family and spend some time after Glee had ended. And we found him. We actually found him via LA, but it was like,
wow.
You're right here. Cause, I live in LA as well. So I came to Winnipeg to do the casting sessions, and we were like, wait a minute. Yeah, we were all confused. We're like, what do you mean? The guy from Glee lives here, literally lives here? He's like, yeah, he lives in Winnipeg. So that was just fortuitous that,
yes.
that would happen.
You took the word out of my mouth. That's what I was going to say, fortuitous, yes.
And we loved him. And then, of course, finding the fellow who plays his father, Mike Sokolowski, played by Greg Henry, who is just an amazing actor. And again, it was a case where people thought, doesn't he usually play like sort of nicer people? He has this wonderful smile, and you see him, so charming. And, the role he plays now is this hard living father who's tough and, has prejudices, and as you see in the story, and he has a real arc and a journey to go through as he tries to keep his son away from this girl. Greg just brought this amazing character to life. And again, he's a great musician. A lot of people didn't know that about him. He plays with his own band. He tours. He's recording an album, I think, presently. So it's very interesting when you're doing a musical and you have to also find people who can, sing and, realistically sing. I mean, we see musicals where people, either they're dubbing their voices, there's no dubbing here. It's all them doing the songs. So we're really fortunate when, he became available to us. And so that's kind of how we found each other.
That's amazing. And they all are, they're they're all excellent in this film. That the young, the young couple, I mean, their chemistry is so palpable and lovely. This film is so timely, though. I mean, here it is set in 1919, but here we are in 2021. And the subject matter of the film is very pertinent today. Did you? Go ahead.
I think, no, you're so right. And it's interesting because that becomes more and more on my mind. I mean, when the screenplay came to me 2 years ago, when I read it, I had no idea yet that it was based on a musical written 15 years ago. So I thought that they had written this, based on what was happening with, the Trump administration and all the current reality here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And there's a character of A.J. Anderson, who is this sort of mean-spirited businessman who's manipulating the whole scene and manipulating government. And I thought, some of his speeches that are still in the movie, I thought, okay, well, they're just sort of riffing off the things that we've heard, Donald Trump say. And then it turned out that, no, AJ, who's a real person, had said these things, in 1919. And I thought, my goodness, history really repeats itself. All those things about, wanting to ban immigrants and changing the laws so that they couldn't protest, all those things, that was all 1919. Even like I think when people see the movie, there's a whole thing where AJ is on his typewriter. He sends out these messages that are going to be printed in the newspaper that he controls. And it was very much basically, like Trump's Twitter feed. And, and that wasn't unintentional. I mean, I thought this is really kind of fun to play with. But the other reality is just that, we've come to a place and, maybe now we've slightly turned a corner. Remember when we were making the movie, we didn't know how things were going to turn out in terms of the election and these things. But we really, this is a point where society was really being pushed apart, from immigration issues with a white supremacist movement was happening in that time period. We have the character of Lisa Bell, which we can talk about, Lisa Bell's character of Emma, who is this young black woman who'd come up from Oklahoma because of all the violence in Oklahoma that blacks were experiencing and had immigrated up to Canada. And so you, in a sense, you have all those issues of race and equality, the immigration issues, all were happening at that time in 1919. So now today, as we're being confronted by all this, I thought, my goodness, this movie, which is imitating which, art or life? And and on the set, the actors really felt that, the sense of we're doing a movie that's so right now in the zeitgeist. And, now I do feel good to see, where I think there's hope right now. And this movie tries to leave you with some of that too.
Yes, definitely. I was blown away by that, and you're right. Here we are, 1919, and, I'm sure 2019, it was exactly the same thing, and here we're 2021. And that's what blew me away. I thought, wow, I wonder when they wrote this, were they writing it during this period of time with what's going on currently? And it's so refreshing to hear that, no, this was actually things that were said at that time by real people. So this doesn't change, does it? You know?
No, even the placards you see, people that are waving when they're opposing the immigrants, and it says, this is a white country only. These are all placards we found from 1919. I mean, it was like, wow, it looked like some of those marches like in Charlottesville, the same kind of thing going on. It was like amazing. But I think we're growing. I mean, I think this was a watershed moment, and I hope, another 100 years from now, we're not saying, oh my goodness, it's repeating itself again. I feel there is something happening. And I think movies like this, I'm hoping, and my goal with the movie is that it gets people to find a conversation around this and to be able to say, oh yeah, there's a reflection of what we were doing, even though it's 1919, we're still doing it. And I hope that conversation leads people to say, is that how we want to be? Can we be better? And it's a musical. So, I think that helps people to have that conversation because there is a certain amount of entertainment in it. So we're not just forcing it on you. It doesn't feel like we're just on the bully pulpit. It's actually, it takes you in, as you can see. You're involved in these characters and their love story. And hopefully people identify and go, yeah, I get that. I have friends who are on different sides, because you hear about right now how many families are experiencing where even within the home, the father and the son aren't talking, or the mom and the dad aren't talking. I had this experience recently with a couple. A couple of years ago, we were on vacation, and they were on opposite sides of this whole political spectrum. And it was like, wow. So people need to be able to have a conversation and be whole again.
Let's hope. It is interesting. We go off on politics here, but I've had conversations with people just recently, actually, about I've never seen such divisiveness in my entire life. I mean, these issues are there, and yes, they're coming to light. And I think that's, if there's anything from what the last, 4 years have been about, it has been to shed light on these deeper issues, that we have as human beings, as a country, the systemic racism, everything. It's bringing things to the light, and we can only change when we look at it. Otherwise, we're pushing it down and not being aware that it's actually there. So I think that's the positiveness of all of it, that you bring it to light, as this movie does, the same thing with the characters, and that we can, begin to work on that if we're willing to. But, I have lost friends during this time period. Again, it's been just like we just have opposite thoughts, and it's just like I can't really talk to you, or we just don't talk about, what's going on in the world and continue the friendship. But I've had others that, we've just said, got apart.
Yes.
So, which is, but also, there's I love the wife of the protagonist, the villain in the film,
Yes.
And, and also about the woman. This is the beginning of the suffragette. Well, not the beginning, but certainly in the middle of the suffragette movement was going on at that point too. So we have everything going on in this film.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Helen Armstrong, who was one of the people in the story leading the strike effort, she's a real character. Helen Armstrong, spent many days in jails. She really fought for this cause and other women's causes. And so we really wanted to put her front and center. And I was really happy about that. And, in a sense, you contrast her with, as you say, A.J. Anderson's wife, the evil protagonist and antagonist. And it's interesting because I don't want to give away, where things end, but it's interesting to see these two different women, and they are both strong women, but in very different circumstances. And, one married to the guy who, is the evil villain, but, her evolution as a character and how she evolved was really important. So you're right. This story takes on a lot of different tones, as well as, I say, with the immigrant issue and also indigenous issues, which, are finally coming back to the forefront, here in Canada and in the U.S. And when we're doing this story, I mean, this is sort of taking a sideways look here, but when the script came to me, there was no characters of color in the script. There was, there was no black maid, there was no indigenous people or any of that was in the story. And so when I read the script, although I loved it, I said to Danny, the writer and producer, it'd be really interesting if we looked at the times. I think you're going to find that there were a lot of people of color involved, but back then, unfortunately, because of bias, the camera always focused basically on the white leading characters of the day, and and upper class and all that. So as we went into the history books, we were sure enough able to find all these stories of the immigrant experience of people of color, and particularly indigenous people and their involvement. So the character of Emma, which Lisa Bell plays and now sings the lead song Stan, was invented because of the fact that we realized that all these black folk from Oklahoma had come up to the Manitoba, Winnipeg, region. And so we included her story. And then we also looked at the fact that indigenous people were very involved in volunteering for the war, World War I. And so when the soldiers came back from war, there was all these indigenous soldiers who had fought, and they came back, and once again, they were treated as second-class citizens. So that character of Gabriel came out of those discussions. And I think that's just so important to recognize, the plight of the indigenous people then and now. And hopefully this story does some justice to that as well.
It does, and I was happy to see that you did have a black character, in this film, and indigenous character also, because it does, again, it's all about immigrants too in this movie. Yes. For some reason, I think we in America believe that Canada is much more open and less prejudiced than we are here. Is that a true statement, or?
No, I used to think that too, and it's so funny because I grew up in Canada, and I went to went to university there, and then I went to the States, and I'd often in those early days when I was here in the U.S. telling people, "Oh, Canada's a wonderful place because there's so much less discrimination and all that." But I've really come to, I guess maybe as an adult, grown up, look at it and see it more for what it is. And when it comes to the treatment of Indigenous people, Canada has a terrible track record. It is trying to do things now. I mean, it's kind of waking up to what it has done and trying to admit that, but also on the issue of race when it comes to black and brown folks, lots of discrimination. I didn't feel it as much because I'm a person of color, and I didn't. And it's funny, only more recently, about 10 years ago, talking with my father was the first black person to move into not only the city but that part of Canada where we lived. And he was one of the first Africans. My dad's from Nigeria, so he's one of the first Africans to settle back then in the late 40s, right after World War II. So, but my dad told us a story about how, he intentionally had us living in a neighborhood that was kind of a mixed Eastern European neighborhood, because in the white Anglo-Saxon neighborhood, we would not have done well. And I didn't know that. So as a kid, I didn't really recognize how much prejudice was around me. My dad just sort of wanted to shield us from that and let us, be raised and just feel good about ourselves and not confronted as much. So it's only later in life that I was like, oh, things weren't probably as nice as I thought. But my dad was, keeping us away from it. And which I think ultimately was a good thing. You do need to face certain realities, but at the same time, it allowed us to grow up, in a community that was much more accepting. And that kind of worked.
Yeah, that's a blessing. Robert, our time is up. It's been so wonderful having you on the show. Everybody go find Stand. It's out there, right? You can get it just about anywhere.
Yeah, if you just go on, I think it's something like, if you go www.stand-something, it's there.
It's there. You'll find it. I recommend it. Go find it. It's a wonderful film, and you can watch it with the entire family. So I wish you much success, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much. It was real fun talking with you.
You too, Robert. You too. Thank you.
All right.
You can listen to The Jan Price Show whenever and wherever at thejanpriceshow.com, where all my shows are archived. Also, anywhere you get your podcast, the iHeart Podcast Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. You can like us at The Jan Price Show on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at The Jan Price Show. Thank you for listening.
Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show, all about movies.